Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 882. I had the white pieces and started off with e4. My opponent went for the French defense with e6. So we get a couple of normal moves, d4, d5, and I play knight c3. It's the main move here, and it allows black to choose between the classical variations with knight f6 or bishop b4, the win hour. But there are other choices here, and the third choice is d takes e4, the Rubinstein variation. So you normally just take back with the knight. Well, it's the only way to take back. And then there's different ways for white to continue. Knight f6 is actually a bit of an unusual move, but and he plays knight c3 later. So black obviously has his own way of playing this opening. There's an interesting line here, the bishop d7 line. Is known as the Fort Knox variation, and this bishop comes out to this diagonal. Looks pretty good along this diagonal. It's kind of a slow way of developing, but black has kind of a closed position and maybe can get away with it. Knight f6 seems to leave white a little better. It's funny, notice that there's only 32 games in the database where knight f6 was played in this position, and then suddenly if you play bishop g5, you've transposed into a line with 1,000 moves. But bishop g5 is not the best move here. The chess engine likes the knight takes f6 move, and it gives second place to bishop d3. So those are both reasonable ways to play here to try and take advantage of what black is doing. If you play bishop g5, black will play bishop to e7. I think there's nothing really special going on. It's not like the classical French where you've got the possibility of the e-pawn coming forward and harassing that knight. So I think black is fine in those lines. So the bishop d3 is a good move here and keeps an edge for white. And knight c6 continues, like I said, with his slightly unusual line of play. And now for the maximum benefit for white, I should probably play knight f3. Notice that this pawn has been seemingly hanging for a move, because now it's attacked twice and it's not defended at all, and knight f3 only defends it once. But of course it's defended by the trick where knight takes, queen takes, so there's a loose queen sitting there, and then you play bishop here, check. With the knight out of the way, there's a check. So knight f3 is a perfectly adequate defense for the pawn, and I didn't really need to play c3 here. So c3, okay move. It keeps an edge for white, but not the maximum. Not the maximum I could get out of the position. Let's see. He goes bishop e7. I go knight f3 now. He castles, and I castle, and we're just out of the book. And like I said, white is keeping some kind of edge here. Let's see. He played h6. I went h3. Actually, h3 maybe was the... Well, there's an interesting idea. So h3, the point of h3 is not to keep the knight out of this square, which is not a big threat. It's to allow the bishop to come here, and then if the knight goes to h5, then the bishop can retreat. So I don't want to trade off that nice dark squared bishop once I get it outside the pawn chain. But the chess engine has a more direct way of getting to bishop f4. It just trades. Then there's no possibility of the knight coming to h5 here. So if there's no knight on h5, you can play bishop f4 right away. So it gains a tempo. So that's a better way to play h3, is a tempo losing move. Although once again, black is playing slowly, and white keeps an edge here. So he trades at this point. I take back. Goes bishop to d6. And here's another slight mistake, although I think it's okay. When I take, though, it gives him an extra center pawn. So the chess engine prefers not to take. It would play either queen d2 or even bishop to g3, just dropping the bishop back and letting black take and taking back with the f pawn. It would open up the f file, would double the pawns over here, but king is pretty safe because this diagonal is blocked by the d pawn, so no checks along that. Suddenly opened a diagonal there after the trade, and maybe these pawns can come forward and participate in a kingside attack or something. So bishop d6 helps black a little bit, because he can take back with a pawn, and now he's got 2 pawns in the center, and you'll see that he actually takes advantage of this a little bit later. So let's see, I drop my bishop back to c2. I'm going to line up the usual battery. The chess engine would just keep developing with rook e1 there. He goes e5, and I go, I take it. Let's see, knight e7. Oh, knight e7 was the chess engine's recommended move here. Didn't especially care for e5, with the idea of playing like this and meeting the threat with g6, and then the knight has, not there, the knight has a good square on f5. So interesting play for black there. He just goes for opening the center, which is okay too. But the white is still keeping some kind of edge in this position. D takes e5. And I just went rook e1. If he trades queens, it'll bring another rook of mine to the center. And I've got some pressure on his position, it feels like. If he pushes a pawn forward to support this pawn, he'll be weak on the light squares, and maybe I can do something with the bishop and the knight. So I'm not too worried about the trades. I just go rook e1, keep my pieces coming out. He plays queen f6. I go queen d3, setting up this battery that I wanted. He blocks with g6. And now I'm trying to figure out how to exploit these somewhat weakened dark squares here. Come up with the idea of knight to d2, which is okay. The chess engine likes this move, queen e3, putting some immediate pressure here. It would actually play like this, not defending that pawn immediately, but throwing in bishop f5, and then maybe taking a move out to defend the pawn. But then this would let me damage the pawn structure over here. So yeah, it looks pretty good. If, of course, black doesn't have to play with that way with bishop f5, but he has to find some way to support that h-pawn. He probably doesn't want to give it up for nothing. Anyway, I noticed that pawn was weak. I was just kind of waiting for a moment to attack it when maybe there was something more going on. But anyway, this seems to have been a good position, a good time to attack the pawn, at least according to the chess engine. Anyway, I went with knight d2 with the idea of repositioning it to the e4 square. He went queen h4. I go knight e4. He goes bishop e6. Okay, d1. So I've got all my pieces out, nicely centralized. And it's a good position for white. I'm keeping some kind of edge through all of this. He does play king g7 here, so I never got a chance to hit that h-pawn. That's probably a good move. And then I went queen f3. So queen f3, the chess engine much prefers queen b5, which I think is interesting because it's kind of typical. It's happened in the last game too, that I was kind of focused on the king side play and ignoring opportunities over on the queen side. But, makes the knight a bit uncomfortable. He doesn't want to move that pawn forward and leave a loose knight there. And, if he moves a rook to defend the pawn, I don't know, maybe I can pile up on the knight some more. But, well, I guess also my knight can hop in here and chase his rook away. So maybe I can get some mileage out of harassing his pieces over on the queen side. Anyway, yeah, I was focused on the king side, as I said. Let's see, he went rook a d8. I went knight to c5. Thinking of trading up this bishop here. Perhaps he dropped the bishop down, and also I was hitting the loose pawn. So he dropped his bishop back, defended the pawn, and I thought bishop e4. This was a good square for the bishop now. Normally you want knights here, but this is a square where the knight can be chased away at any time, or the bishop for that matter, and the bishop had a more interesting option after it gets kicked. Could take over there. And now he just played queen e7, which gives up a pawn, and he really doesn't have enough compensation for the pawn. The chess engine would try to hold on to it. Would play something like this. Well, there are different lines. This is just one of them. Knight a5 was something I was thinking he might play, and I was planning to play b4. And then, well, he can throw in this trade and then play b6. It's a counterattack. Also, queen e7 would have worked at that point too. The idea being that if I take his knight, he takes my knight. So the counterattack on my knight kind of saves his knight. Let's see, and I could play bishop d5 here, and then queen back to e7 to defend here. And it seems like this is holding, although white is more active. So white still has the advantage, but the material is still even. So queen e7 just gives up a pawn. And yeah, he played queen e7. I took. and just grab that pawn. I didn't see any way he could get any particular edge out of this, and the chess engine didn't find anything either. Then he went queen g5, and now I traded here. Actually, I was miscalculating something. I was thinking queen f3. He might push this pawn forward with an attack on my queen and my knight, but of course my knight can just come back and take that pawn, so it doesn't even matter. He can throw in, say after queen f3, he can throw in the rook trade to drag my rook away from stopping this e-pawn, but with the queen on f3 and the knight there, that's still sufficient to stop that pawn from coming forward. So I could have just played queen f3. I didn't need to trade, and then this trade doesn't really help me any. So that was a bit of a mistake. Let's see, I go queen f3. Oh yeah, and the other point is that instead of the trade, the chess engine, well, it liked queen f3, but it also liked even more this move, knight to e4. So black can trade here, probably should. And then the queen's under fire. Queen drops back, and then the knight can hop into d6. So I had been eyeing this d6 square for a while, and that's a nice square to jump into. If I get rid of the minor piece there, if I get rid of his bishop for my knight, then I'm just a pawn up in a pretty straightforward endgame. Well, it's not quite an endgame with both a rook and a queen on, but it's a pretty straightforward win without the complications of bishop versus knight. I didn't look at this, but I wonder if he could try pinning it. I do have this loose rook back here. Well, it's attacked twice and defended twice, so it doesn't have to move, actually. So maybe I could just move this pawn up and defend my knight that way, and then my pieces would be free to move. He could come over with the king and try to attack it, but I could always check the king away. Anyway, that would be interesting. I just traded here and played queen to f3, which is a move I'd been thinking of. He dropped back to e7, and I went with b4, defending my knight. So my knight is secure there. I don't have to worry about holding on to it. He goes f5, and yeah, let's go forward a few moves. I go queen e3, he goes e4. It's all pretty reasonable. I go f3 to undermine that, and this is good for me. After bishop b7, let's see, I take, he takes, and then I played knight takes e4, which is just a blunder. He could have actually kind of equalized. So I should just take the bishop. I don't know why I didn't like that. I mean, I thought about taking the bishop, and I thought there was something going on there, but there isn't. He can, yeah, pretty much has to take back, and then I can grab the pawn, and I am 2 pawns up, and a simple kind of position with just a queen and a rook for each side. So that would be a pretty straightforward win. Instead, I took here, and that allowed him this move, rook e8, which is good. That's the right move, and just pins the knight. And I thought the queen check would save me for some reason, but there's still a pin on because this rook here is loose, and there's no easy way to defend it. Yeah, and he's piling up on my rook, so I don't have time. I mean, he's piling up on my knight, so I don't have time to play something like rook up and knight over. Knight defending the rook is a way to unpin in situations like that, but after rook up, he can just take the knight. It's already under fire, and the check didn't really help. The best play is like this. Queen takes e7, giving up the knight and playing, well, I could throw in the check, get my queen back to the center for free, more or less, and then push the a-pawn. And I've got 3 pawns against the bishop. And Chess Engine actually still gives a slight edge to white here. I guess those pawns are going to be quite a force to deal with, and materially they're about equivalent. So that would be best play. Let's see, I went queen d4 check right away, and then here's his mistake, king f7. He only has one move here. He has to play queen to e5 to block the check, and then I could take on a7, and we get the same kind of position where I've got he will take the knight with the bishop, and I will have 3 pawns against the bishop. Actually, yeah, he's not going to take right away, but eventually he's going to win that piece, and then I will have 3 pawns against the bishop, and that is about even according to the Chess Engine, or a slight edge to white. Instead, he moved his king, and any king move fails. The dark squares are out because the queen is checking along that diagonal. If he goes to the squares on the F file, I can unpin with rook here, and that saves my piece. And if he goes to the only other squares, these two, then the knight has a check that will win the queen. So every move loses here except for queen e5. He went king f7, and then the fastest win here is the rook check. I should throw in the rook check here, drive the king back, and then I can move my knight with check here, and this is not good. This check finally picks up the queen. This is a computer line. It's actually a forced mate in about 9 moves, coming in like this. So, but even if you didn't have the forced mate, you've got a queen and a rook against a bishop and a rook. So, pretty easy win there. What I played is winning too, so it's not a bad move. I just went knight d6, hitting his king, and queen takes. Yeah, I was expecting something else somehow, but this still works. I get the queen, he gets the rook and the knight, and so I have a queen against bishop and knight, plus I still have the 2 extra pawns. So pretty straightforward win at this point. It's just, yeah, and I don't do anything to give up the advantage. I just have to be careful I don't allow any weird perpetuals or something like that. But because I'm up with passed pawns over here, he can't even do something like trade the bishop and the rook for the queen by attacking on g2. That would be his kind of only try to materially change the material balance in a way that might allow him to draw, but with the 2 advanced pawns over here, he's not going to be able to accomplish that. So he's trying to keep the pieces on and cause some trouble, but at this point I spot a check that picks up the bishop, and he decided to resign here. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.